Okay, so we're gonna, so it's 12:45. I'll wait, what, 3 minutes here?
You probably don't have to wait for Nick. Chris said he was just still in the main session, but I just texted him. He'll get here soon, and he's going last anyway, so you don't have to hold up for him.
Okay, I'm gonna get started since we are right on time and I see a number of participants here. My name's Steve Sherman. I'll be moderating today's panel and I'll introduce myself a bit more. I want to just make sure that you're in the right spot since this is a concurrent session slot. And this is about data, how data visibility drives innovation. Getting to zero waste requires knowledge across the supply chain at a level of detail that most organizations have often don't think about in great detail. Doing a gap analysis and gathering data and using emerging technologies to know not just what's in the aggregate bin that's being actually tossed or kind of tossed at each step, and where contamination is occurring, and notifying stakeholders, all of that can really make a huge difference in your programs. We will hear today from three speakers about how collecting, analyzing, and using data has driven positive outcomes. And today we have three speakers. We have Amy, Anna, and Nick, and I'll introduce them further as each of them speaks. So the format for today will be that we'll hear from each of the speakers. We'll open up the chat to questions and comments, and then we'll move on to each of the successive ones. And if we have some time at the end, then we can go back and ask questions for the whole panel. I assume people can hear me okay. And I'll introduce myself. Stephen Sherman with Stephen Sherman Consulting. I'm in Berkeley, California. I've been involved with data gathering and evaluation ever since writing an economic cost benefit analysis of large-scale composting in Westchester County, New York, as my master's thesis at Cornell University. I've long been involved in planning and implementing municipal composting programs as a consultant, a practitioner, an advocate, and trainer. And currently I'm consulting independently while serving on the boards of Upstream, which focuses on promoting reuse and reducing the use of plastics. And I also serve on the Berkeley Zero Waste Commission. Our first speaker today is Amy Markman. Amy is Director of Sustainability at SBM in New York. Her focus areas include green cleaning, recycling programs, reduction and reuse efforts, and zero waste diversion reports. Amy has 15 years as a waste professional and maintains LEED and certification and several other credentials. And so let's hear from Amy. She has plenty to present. And then I'll introduce the other speakers. So Amy is talking about gap analysis, and first we'll learn what that is and what its value is. Amy, thank you for coming. Thank you for presenting. Welcome.
Hi, thanks everybody. Yeah, we'll go ahead and get started. Do you want to do the next slide? So we're talking about what is a zero waste gap analysis. And this can mean different things to different organizations. Let's see, go back one slide. I don't know where the information is on here, but anyway, for the purposes of this presentation, basically a zero waste gap analysis is a review of a facility or site, which we'll call the project, in alignment with a zero waste certification standard in order to determine what is needed to achieve that certification. So through this process, the gap analysis will help define the project scope. For example, do you want to include an entire campus or a single building? A gap analysis can help you identify zero waste programs and processes already in place. These may be ones that you already know about and oftentimes can uncover informal programs. We see a lot of reuse programs, for example, that are not formalized and usually are not accounted for in the data on the diversion report. We also find gaps or areas of opportunity where more information or new programs are needed, and specifically what will have the most impact toward the total reduction or improvement of the diversion data. We're often able to identify which teams, departments, or individuals and vendors are already involved and who needs to be involved in the process. Usually it's facilities management teams, sometimes sustainability and EHS personnel, and most waste vendors who are already engaged in the conversation. And we also often find that other departments such as HR and procurement can be missing from this discussion. And those types of departments are important not only for programs such as training and upstream solutions, but also in accounting for potential reductions that can be included in the data, such as paperless communications and packaging reductions. Review of waste data and reports. We find what is tracked and what isn't, where there are gaps in the data, and are there any assumptions and calculations, and are those transparent? Many times we find that entire waste streams aren't included at all, which can positively or even negatively affect the reported diversion rate. And from there, we can determine the timeline, budgets, and priorities for the path towards zero waste. Also, whether or not certification should be pursued. Sometimes there's value in conducting a gap analysis, even if you don't go for a certification. Next slide. So what is involved in a zero waste gap analysis? We like to conduct a site visit and a walkthrough of the site or project area so we can see and observe existing programs. And at that same time, we can see and observe informal programs that the site may or may not be aware of. We also speak to departmental staff to understand roles and responsibilities. And sometimes we may not see things on a walkthrough, like procurement processes, trainings, availability of information to staff, and communications. And then a review of data. We often find that the reported diversion rate is often different from the zero waste diversion rate. And I'll get more into that in a little bit. And a lot of times what we find already reflected in the data, and which most people start with, is that downstream, so like the green boxes down there. So it's very important, but a lot of times there are opportunities in the midstream and upstream, as most of you know, through Path Towards Zero Waste. Next slide. So there are a few zero waste certification standards available. We usually look to align our gap analysis with the TRUE approach. Many of you are already familiar with TRUE, but it is a third-party certification administered by the GBCI that provides a zero waste framework for projects to divert a minimum of 90% of non-hazardous waste from landfill and from incineration. These are the main credit categories that TRUE looks at. It is a comprehensive approach that helps teams fully evaluate all aspects of waste from upstream, midstream, and downstream. And there are also many free resources available from TRUE to help guide teams in their path to zero waste, again, whether or not you decide to pursue certification. Next slide. So this is an example of what one of our summary results from a gap analysis can look like. After looking at programs and operations and alignment with TRUE credits, we determine which ones are likely achievable. For example, are there programs already in place, but they just need to be documented and tracked in order to meet the credit requirements? Or based on what the site's already doing, some of the credits could be easy to implement with just minimal effort or cost. And in the maybe category, sometimes we may not have enough information from the gap analysis, or there would be some things that would require additional effort and additional costs. And then the ones that are likely not able to be achieved would either not apply. For example, building in an urban area without any exterior grounds would not be able to pursue the grass cycling credits, for example. Or a credit may be potentially achievable, but the cost and timeline may be too extensive to pursue for initial certification. So in this particular example, the facility that we reviewed based on existing programs was able to achieve a certified level with 35 credits, with many additional credits potentially available to them. So the gap analysis provides a good snapshot at where a facility is starting from. And for this particular client, they were further along than they anticipated being. Next slide. So of course, the data component of the gap analysis is important in any efforts towards zero waste. The requirement for TRUE is at least 12 months on average at or above 90% diversion. So not only do you need to know what your current diversion rate is, but you'll need to to be able to see how those numbers could shift, especially if you're looking to implement or track new programs. So this is an example of maybe what a solid waste report could look like. One thing that we see when we're looking through data initially is that a lot of places will aggregate all data for all materials for an entire year. So while that's good for maybe reporting up, it's hard to see in detail maybe how you're getting to that total diversion rate. And True does require a monthly breakdown of data. So the monthly breakdown is also helpful to identify trends and pinpoint changes resulting from program implementation. Also adding line items for specific materials as they are set up for removal is also helpful to see how each material is impacting your totals. The other thing that's helpful to understand is where the information is coming from. So for example, if a data reported from a waste vendor is static, like it's the same number from month to month, that's usually because the container is not weighed. So this is common for dumpsters such as front end loaders, and calculations based on assumptions and estimations are fine and they are accepted, but this isn't maybe going to tell you some of the nuances from programs that may not necessarily be reflected in this data. So maybe having a process to monitor the containers if you have a waste reduction in place can be helpful, or monitoring the fullness and adding a fullness component to that calculation may also help. Next slide. Here's another example of a roll-up. So one thing that wasn't reflected in the previous slide was some of those zero waste calculations. So this is a roll-up of some of these different kind of points. So traditional diversion rate is things that are usually just going downstream. And in comparison, the landfill diversion rate here is at 100%. So when you hear zero waste to landfill goals, this doesn't necessarily reflect your true diversion either. It's telling you that all of your material is not going to a landfill, regardless of how much waste you generate. And then the zero waste diversion does not include landfill or waste to energy, but it takes into account reduction and reuse programs. So you can demonstrate the impact of those initiatives that they have on your path to zero waste. Next slide. This is an example of a client that we've worked at who was at a 68% diversion rate with their existing downstream programs. So these are your typical recycling programs a lot of people are tracking. And then after conducting the gap analysis, we were able to find opportunities which increased their diversion to 88%. So durable cup program, pallet recycling, pallet reuse, all of those were going to improve the diversion rate an additional 20%. And then to get that site above 90%, we took another look at what was going out in the trash and found an additional diversion potential through some food waste. So this helped push them over that 90% to achieve true certification. And next slide. And so that's all I've got. So I'll hand it back over to Steve, who can introduce Anna.
Thank you, Amy. We do have some time for some questions. Let me open it up there and cross my fingers and see if we can get some questions going. You can put something in the chat if you have a question and I can read it out.
Hey, Steve, I think we were going to hold the questions to the end after we did all three. And then,
All right.
then that gives people more time to kind of, you know, think about it and put something in the chat.
While we do have Amy's slide up, I'd like to just ask one question. If you could go back, I think it was 3 slides where you had talked about tracking not just recycling, but that one, not just the landfill diversion rate, but also some other things in here. Could you just go over that one more time, or
yeah, sorry, I did gloss over that a little bit. And I think thanks Sue for the question, how and why does reduction matter? So
yes.
A lot of times you might have a program, let's say you have a paperless program, and so that paper that would otherwise go in your recycle stream and improve your diversion rate, if you then take that paper out, it actually decreases your diversion rate. So by accounting for maybe that paper reduction that you're not generating, you're not penalized for it. And so you're accounting for that reduction in that the zero waste calculation.
Okay, thank you. So I'm gonna hold these questions to the side, but I'll just share them with you, Amy, so that you can be thinking about them. Great information. How and why does reduction matter? How does the participation rate and the quality and efficacy of education and outreach approaches figure in?
Yep, and maybe we can hold that
Yeah.
for the end, because I think some of the other presentations will
Yeah.
touch on some of that as well.
Exactly. Okay, so thank you, Amy. So let's bring up the next slideshow. I'll introduce Anna Dangler. Anna Dangler serves as Senior Sustainability Advisor with the firm Great Forest in New York. Anna has managed sustainability projects such as LEED certification and carbon footprints, focusing on best environmental practices for businesses. Anna has taught sustainability and green building at City University of New York and has presented at various conferences. She holds a master's degree in sustainability management from Columbia University. Thank you so much for sharing your presentation, which will focus on commercial buildings and studying what's in there and how to both reduce and recycle, compost the materials that are there. Go ahead.
Right, thank you. So I'll be talking about a comprehensive study that we did of a large number of waste audits performed pre-COVID. This is a study of commercial buildings waste. So next slide, and I'll just talk about Great Forest. So we're a zero waste consultancy. We've been around for over 30 years, and we offer various services, including consulting and brokerage. But for the purposes of our discussion here today, I'll be talking about the waste audits part of our data service. You can go to the next slide. So this is the scope of our study. So we took all of our comprehensive waste audits performed in the US and major international cities. The regions we looked at are here, but the majority of the audits were done in the United States, New York, DC, Mid-Atlantic, not just DC, and not just New York region, New Jersey, Connecticut, upstate, and California. So East Coast and West Coast primarily, but there were audits reflected across the country as well as across the globe. The facilities are large real estate firms, financial services companies, and tech companies, and the average size of the facility was over 500,000 square feet. So these are, clients. These are waste audits we perform for our clients that, have some interest in, reducing their waste and doing the right thing, have sustainability programs in place. So we can keep that in mind for when we talk about the data. And the time frame. So all of these audits were done in 2019 and early 2020. We can go to the next slide and talk about the way we did the audits. So this is an overview. We've done, a comprehensive audit, meaning each waste stream was analyzed, weighed separately, categorized, and put into 20 different categories. Each category was weighed, and we can talk more about all the categories that we used, but part of the categories was taking recyclable materials and noting which recyclable materials were clean and which were soiled. And in addition to how we did the audits themselves, our study looked at building information, meaning where they were located, differences in programs between regions, but also differences in programs within regions. So a lot of buildings have a multi-stream recycling program that separates paper and cardboard from glass, metal, and plastic. And some have all recyclables together. And some buildings have an organic stream and divert that towards an organics program, and some buildings don't. So there's a lot of different factors in play. And if I didn't mention, this was over 100 waste audits that we were compiling data for. Yeah. Oh, and I wanted to mention about recyclable items, clean versus soiled. The soiled is defined as materials that could be recycled if they had been cleaned, but they would not be recycled because of how dirty they are. They would not be, you know, they could be sent to a recycling facility, but they would be taken out as too dirty to be recycled. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So what did we find out? So after compiling all of this information, we have a couple of findings, and I think most folks who are familiar with the waste industry and the commercial waste industry won't find anything too surprising, but let me know if anything sticks out to people. Trash. Trash was the largest waste stream, you know, between glass, metal, and plastic recycling, mixed recycling, organics. Trash was consistently across the board the largest stream. Within the trash stream, and this is our little graphic here, 62% of trash is not trash at all. As we know, trash is not trash, it's materials that could be diverted for recycling and reuse. And of that material, of that stream, organics was the largest amount in the trash. So organics is the biggest missed opportunity here. For the recyclables, plastics was notable in that it was the most contaminated recyclable material. Cardboard was the least contaminated material, and consistently across the board, it was largely recycled. The other thing to note is, unfortunately, liquids and electronics were consistently found across the board in all buildings waste streams. And so this is, you know, electronics do need to be diverted to recycling, but they were not going to the main trash and recyclable streams that we audited. So they did not belong there, as do liquids. Liquids do not belong there either. Going on to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about trash. So here is the, the chart here shows the waste stream characterization. So it shows all of the streams. We've got the paper recycling stream, cardboard, GMP, glass, metal, plastic, single stream, diverted organics, and trash stream. And you'll see that trash was the largest stream. So this is on average. So, you know, this is compiling, you know, over 100 buildings waste audit data. So it's a little unique in that it's a compilation, but we can get some takeaways just from, you know, understanding the average of these buildings. And consistently, trash is the largest. And of that trash stream, you can see the green there is residuals, and the organics, the gray is the gray is organics. So you can see also, you know, within the trash stream, how much of each material is there. In the diverted organic stream, it's mostly organics that we found. In the cardboard recycling stream, mainly cardboard that we found. Yeah, and slew of various materials that we were able to identify. Next slide. So this chart shows the breakdown of the trash stream. We've talked about this. The largest chunk, organics, 36%, even above residual. I didn't talk about what residual meant. So for our paper, we didn't want to use the word trash for the items that were in the trash stream because it gets really confusing. So we decided to use the word residual, and that refers to items that do not belong in any of the other diversion streams. So items that do not have a recycling program, they're composite materials, materials that aren't separated and could be easily recycled. And this also includes a lot of, plastic composites, such as, a paper cup. It's not really paper. It's got a plastic lining or wax or whatever. So that's trash, not trash at all. But we do have a significant portion of, materials that we need to reduce. All of those items that are going into the trash, both the composite residual materials as well as the organics. Next slide. So looking at this chart, it shows a breakdown of the glass, metal, and plastic recycling stream. I have I don't have it in here in this presentation, but there's a similar slide for mixed recycling. So something that includes all of the materials as, what they are asking you to put in. For glass, metal, and plastic programs, paper and cardboard were not specifically meant to be put in this waste stream, but they do appear, as do residuals, as do the composite, plastic films or what have you. But the largest chunk, largest piece of the pie was plastic at almost 24%. The next largest is actually glass, because we're talking about materials by weight. So that's actually not a whole lot of glass compared to the amount of plastic visually that you would see. But glass is just so heavy. It reigns supreme in a lot of ways. The other thing to note is the soiled plastics at just under 10%. That is a significant portion of the recycling stream, and it was plastic that was kind of, wish cycling, like, oh, I don't have to dump out this tuna fish from the can, it's fine. So yes, soiled plastic is an issue there. Next slide. So this is just, so I want to move from, talking about the waste streams to the total building and the materials that we found in those buildings. So of all the waste, not in any particular one waste stream, but of all the waste, organics made up just under 30%. So it's a third of the building, of a typical building's waste, right? And that's significant. And the fact that a majority of buildings do not have organics diversion, this is significant. It's also significant to note, I mean, this was 2019, if we can put ourselves back in that mindset of that time. People were going into the office, they were eating at their desk, they were doing, this is such a significant portion of a commercial building's waste stream, even though you would expect, organic food waste to come from the residential sector or come from, primarily like hotels or, large retail. Organics is significant in office buildings. So that's my takeaway for there. So it's a huge opportunity for diversion, and we shouldn't ignore it. It's definitely difficult to get organics programs up and running, but it can be done. Next slide. So here we've got the material cardboard. So I talked about how cardboard is, people are doing a great job with cardboard. On the left, we've got the amount of cardboard in an office building. So we looked at organics, that was about a third of the waste coming out of a building. Cardboard is, what is that? That's like 10%, about that. I can't quite see the numbers. And on the right, we have a chart comparing each of the different materials and how well people were sorting them before, pre, janitorial taking them away. So we've got cardboard. Green is the amount of recyclables in the correct place, in the correct bin, and brown is a recyclable material in the refuse, in the trash. And you'll see cardboard with people doing a great job with that. Paper, not as good, but people are very cognizant of paper being recyclable. And then not so great a job of glass, metal, and plastic. And you'll see plastic. It's about the same amount of plastic going in the recycling stream as the trash stream. So I don't think that would be too surprising to anybody. I think this is fairly yeah, that makes sense. But I think the unique thing here is this study that we've done is people haven't actually looked at this data before on a per building basis. So so this is kind of a first. Yeah, next slide. So this is materials by weight. So we looked at 20 plus materials. I mean, we had so many waste audits. There were waste audits that even had specific streams, like the client wanted certain streams to be noted, like styrofoam, a client really wanted to note how much styrofoam, whereas other buildings, we did not pull out styrofoam. But for consistency across the board and just for the amount, because styrofoam is very light, it didn't really register even within those buildings. But overall, these are the major waste streams. And next slide, I just wanted to point out liquids and e-waste. So this is an average building tonnage for our waste audit projection. Liquids is it's not insignificant, the amount of liquids ending up in the trash. So this would be water in a half-filled water bottle, Poland Spring bottle, not emptied out. It's heavy, like glass. Liquid is heavy. So we want to make sure that people are getting the message that liquids don't belong in the trash. They can be poured down the sink, and that shouldn't be too difficult, but as it happens, it's fairly prevalent. And the other item is the e-waste. We don't want to see e-waste there, but we do. So next slide. Sorry, I'll try to wrap this up. Our main takeaways: we need to address organics, we want to reduce plastics and make sure the plastics that we are recycling are clean. We want to conduct waste audits, call up Great Forest and have us do a waste audit. Pour out liquids, address e-waste, and education, policies, training, all that good stuff. Next slide. So next steps, where do we go from here? So our study was actually published in the May 2022 issue of the Journal of Solid Waste Technology and Management. I can put the link in the chat after this, so you can look at it and read into the details that I didn't quite get into here. And what's next for us with this? We are going to be looking at the carbon impacts of waste. We know that there is a link there, but getting into actual data, using the information we gleaned from this study, we can really make use of that and talk about the climate impacts. So that's it for me. You can go to the next slide. And that's our contact information. We're headquartered in New York, but we work all over. info@greatforest.com.
Anna, thank you so much for your presentation that generated quite a lot of questions and comments. So I want to make sure that we save some time at the end for those questions. We'll get to them. And I just want to note that since we started, we now have, I see 107 participants in this workshop. So Nick, you have the slot that's probably going to have the most people attending. So let me introduce Nick. I'll just reintroduce myself, Stephen Sherman Consulting in Berkeley, California. Nick lives nearby me in Walnut Creek. Nick is an electrical engineer turned entrepreneur. He founded Zabal in 2016 to help organizations reach zero waste. Nick served as a board member of the Northern California Recycling Association and actively participates in local beach cleanups and zero waste advocacy. Welcome, Nick Balachandran.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate the intro. Can you all hear me? All right, great. I'm Nick Balachandran, founder and CEO of Zabal. Thank you for the opportunity to present our work here today. So let me give you a quick background about Zabal and then get into the details of this very specific project that helps understand how to sample bags and really figure out how many bags to sample each day and over what time frame to estimate contamination. Next slide, Steve.
Hold on, there we go.
All right. So about Zabal, so we're a small company. We're based out of Walnut Creek, California. Our work has been featured in industry publications like Resource Recycling and Waste 360 for our work with UCSF. Last year, we were named as one of the top 5 AI startups helping advance the circular economy. And this year, in the past 1 year, this last 1 year has been really exciting. We received 3 different funding awards from the EPA to help push and improve the recycling infrastructure in the US with our AI-based technology. We're really excited for that. So we're on a hiring spree, so please check out our careers website at zabalinc.com. So typically we work with universities and hospitals, so Stanford and UCSF are some of our clients with the recycling partnership. We have this huge project that's going on in Atlanta as well. So right now we're in California and Atlanta sort of helping generators get to zero waste. Our mission is to help generators get to zero waste using AI and to drive sort of behavioral change with actionable insights. And so just quickly about our product suite. So we're a software company and our product suite is called Zabal Zero. It's an end-to-end zero waste management and workflow automation platform for enterprises. There are mainly 2 products, invoice analytics and mobile tagging, to help generators understand everything about how materials move from the point of disposal inside the buildings, in loading docks, understand sort of workflows, and to the point of hauling, understanding logistics and costs. So we help with this entire sort of end-to-end management using our AI-based platform. And a quick shout out to Stephanie. I'm really consciously trying to not use waste and trying to get rid of that waste from my vocabulary. So just to sort of dive down into the landscape of materials in the US, the 40% of the landfill waste or sorry, next slide. I'm sorry, I forgot to advance. Next slide. Okay, so this is the product suite, and just to give you a sense, you can hope these slides will be shared later. So in the US, 40% of the landfill materials is from commercial buildings like universities, hospitals, office buildings, and so we're really focused on helping this particular sector send less waste to landfills and get to zero waste. Next slide. And so the current solutions for monitoring materials is through waste audits, as Anna went into great detail on how this is done by weights. This is definitely a great way for a holistic understanding of what the building generates in terms of the composition of materials. There's also bin sensors that helps you understand what's being picked up before a hauling from a fullness standpoint. And then there's reports that the haulers share. So some of this has information on the number of pulls per week or some tonnage information. And so what we are trying to answer is, what if you wanted to implement a more practical way to understand how materials are moving on a monthly basis and use that information to affect behavioral change, implement any programs depending on how the materials are being sort of generated inside the building and how they're being disposed of. And so this is the sort of project that we embarked on. Next slide. with UCSF and the Department of Environment. This was in the peak of the pandemic when we implemented this project for a period of 6 months to really understand how does visual sampling help gather the information to drive behavior change, and also help us figure out statistical information about sampling frequencies. And a shout out to Enviolutions to help us sort of implement this during the pandemic and really in a seamless way. Next slide. So this was the project period, Jan to May 2021, including ramp up times. It was a 6-month period. And we were able to sample 5,000 bags in this period of time. And so there was 4 buildings and over 100 days, measuring 512 cubic yards, out of which 44% was contaminated. And I'll get into how this was measured. Next slide. And so we sampled over half of the dumpsters every single day in each one of these buildings during that 5-month period. And we were able to sort of slice and dice and gig out on the data to figure out what the sampling frequencies should be if we were to implement a program to measure contamination. Next slide. And so what we did was every single day, we were sampling 10 to 15 landfill bags out of those 3-yard dumpsters, over 50% every single day. And then the folks were using the Zabal app to measure how full these bags were and how contaminated they were. So this was user-reported contamination, and this is why it helps to understand from a sampling or statistical perspective how this varies. And then they sorted the bags into the different streams: landfill, organics, compost, recycle. And then they observed the contaminants, so paper towels or plastic bags or contaminants of that sort. And then they tagged the post-sorted dumpsters and carts for how full they were. So we literally understood how the things were moving into the loading dock from inside the buildings, how they were sorted, what the composition was, and then how it ultimately ended up in the different streams. Next slide. And so just to give you a sense, so a landfill bag was pulled out of the dumpster. The folks tagged the bags for how full they were and the contaminants, sorted them into compost, recycling, or left them as landfill. And then that's the information we got. Next slide. And so they used the Zabal app, the mobile tagging app, during this entire process. So it's really easy to just scan, and then the AI tells you how full the bag is. And we have over 93% accuracy, specifically with the UCSF bags, dumpsters, and carts. And then we have an AI that automatically identifies the contents, as you can see in that middle photo, where it draws boxes around the specific contaminants and it highlights them. And so it's really easy to measure the materials in the different streams. Next slide. And so what was our objective with this exercise? And so what we were trying to ask ourselves was, if we wanted to know if the user-reported contamination could replace anecdotal evidence as an alternative form of measurement. And it feels like a quick and a practical way to just look at a bin and sort of identify contamination and then report it. But is it really accurate when you're looking at a whole bunch of bags being sampled every day by users? And could this methodology be used to quickly understand how the materials were being disposed of in buildings, and can this information be used to drive effective change? So last year at CRRA, I spoke about the implications of this particular project, where the UCSF was using this information every month and putting up new signage and speaking to the custodial trainers to improve not just folks disposing of items in the wrong bin and educating them, but also custodian trainers if they were using disposing of entire bags in the wrong dumpsters in the loading dock. So how do we sort of holistically drive behavior change with the entire system? And so essentially we were trying to answer the questions: what is the minimum number of bags that need to be sampled every day, and how often or how long should the bags be sampled? Next slide. And so this is how we sort of slice and dice the information. The y-axis on this series of charts that you will see in the next few slides is the average contamination percentage, and the x-axis is the number of bags that were sampled every day, or in that period of time, so a month in this particular case. And so you can think of it as a slider that you move from left to right in the number of bags being sampled. And what we're looking for is at what point, when you move that slider, does the contamination percentage fall below a certain threshold? So let's say plus or minus 5%. And the good news about this, as it was unexpected to us, is that there was a pattern where the contamination percentage kept dropping as more and more bags were sampled, and the standard deviation also kept dropping as more and more samples. So we could say that statistically that there was a point at which you could figure out what that sampling frequency was. So this is what we did. We looked at the difference in contamination percentage, the user reported contamination percentage in each building over a period of time. So you take a month's worth of data, you average out that contamination percentage. Obviously, there's a standard deviation. It was really high, like 12% in the beginning. So when there was just 1 or 2 bags, and then it dropped to 3% as more and more bags were sampled during the day. So every day, 15 bags were sampled, and we were trying to figure out where do you draw that line where you can figure out what that sampling frequency is. So next slide. And so we looked at this difference in the contamination percentage. And what we found was really interesting, very unexpected, that the contamination percentage as a difference kept dropping as the number of samples kept increasing in this time frame. So, so when you went from 2 bags sampled every day for a month to 15 bags sampled every day for a month, at about 4 bags per day for that monthly average, the contamination difference dropped within 5%. Now, this is going to be different for the different types of buildings. These buildings were specifically academic buildings and labs. And we believe there is a sampling frequency for every archetype of building, and that's what we're getting to. Next slide, please. And so now we looked at what happens if you drop that period of time. So we went from sampling 2 bags every day for a month to 2 bags every day for 3 weeks. And so what does that slider look like when you went from 2 bags to 15 bags averaged for a 3-week period? Now, obviously, intuitively, it makes sense that there's more noise as you decrease the period of time that you're sampling bags. But what does it look like? And we found that, again, each building has its own sampling frequency that you could pick based on this methodology. But within 4 bags a day, most of these buildings, we found that the contamination percentage didn't change beyond that point. So there was no point sampling 8 bags a day for 3 weeks when at 4 bags a day, you get all the information within that plus or minus 5% error. So that was our interesting conclusion from the series of experiments. Next slide. And so now what happens when you go from 3 weeks to 2 weeks? So we went from 4 weeks a month to 3 weeks to 2 weeks. As you can see, the graphs are getting a little more noisier. And the line, the vertical line is moving to the right, as you can expect. So now if you sampled 5 bags a day for 2 weeks straight, you get all the information that you need from that particular building in terms of its contamination percentage. And remember, this is user reported. There's a little bit of training ahead of time with the users, but for the most part, this is the methodology that you could use to estimate the sampling frequency. Next slide. And so one day, so now it comes down to, 1 week, and you can see it's got a little more noisier. You need 8 bags per day if you were sampling just for a week to really understand what the contamination looked like within plus or minus 5% intervals. Next slide. And now this is the most interesting part, where if you're just sampling on a 1-day period, how many bags do I need to accurately estimate contamination percentage? It got really noisy, and we really didn't have enough data to accurately estimate what that sampling frequency is. But you can kind of see the trend where at 2 bags a day, it's really noisy, and then it starts to taper off. And beyond 16 or 17 bags is where it comes down to within plus or minus 5%. So that's how many bags, 16 or maybe 17 bags, that you need to sample every day to get a sense for how that building is performing from a visual perspective. Next slide. So then we sort of switched gears and started looking at what type of contaminants were being observed in these buildings. So this chart here is a word cloud. It kind of gives you a holistic sense for what types of contaminants in the landfill bins or in that landfill dumpster was found across all of these buildings. Now, through our platform, you can even get down to the building level detail or a bag level detail for the types of contaminants. So the larger the words, the more frequently they were found in each of the bags. So it doesn't talk about whether an entire bag was filled with paper towels. It just talks about the presence of paper towels in a bag as a contaminant. And we use the same methodology to estimate what that sampling frequency is. If you wanted to really know if a certain contaminant was prevalent enough for you to call or classify it as a contaminant, statistically speaking. So next slide. So there's a lot of information here, but we sort of looked at, if you look at all those little contaminants that I shared in the previous slide, we looked at how these contaminants changed in that same time period. So over a month, we averaged all the bags and we looked at the percentage of entries or percentage of bags that actually had this particular contaminant. So if you look at the top left graph with paper towels, what it's saying is the difference in the percentage of entries with paper towels from sampling at that frequency is what is on the y-axis, and the x-axis is the same. It's the number of bags being sampled. And again, what we're looking for is that vertical line that we can draw, which tells us that beyond that point, the percentage of bags that had paper towels as a contaminant was within 5%. So we know that we didn't need to sample more bags. And so on a month, if you were sampling bags on a monthly basis, it was 5 bags per day for a month that you need to sample to be confident to say that paper towels were a contaminant. There were a few exceptions where that vertical line that's marked in as in the red box, where that vertical line kind of moved. But in a sense, this concept, this trend maintained itself, throughout this the series of this the analysis. Next slide. And here we show what happens when you went from a month period down to a week. And so you can see there's a lot more noise, and that vertical line went a little further ahead. So you needed 11 bags to sample per day if you're just doing it for a week, as opposed to 5 bags for a month. And this is to identify a contaminant. If you're just looking for contamination percentage, then you go back to the previous set of slides where I was just looking at the contamination percentage. Next slide, please.
Nick, I'm going to, you have the unenviable position of coming last, which means your presentation gets cut a little bit in terms of time. I'm wondering if you can wrap up in the next minute or two.
Sure, yeah, I'm done.
Time for questions.
Yes, absolutely. So this is the last couple of slides. It just summarizes what the sampling frequencies are, and what the time frame is for each of those buildings. So 8 bags per week, 5 bags for 2 weeks, and 4 bags per month, etc. Next slide. And just to summarize the methodology, so determine the unit for sampling, whether it's a bag or a dumpster, measure at least 50% per day, measure over a period of time, so a month, 3 months, or a week, whatever that is. Document the fullness percentage, contamination percentage, and the items. Train the team to estimate the fullness and contamination percentage. There's going to be variance, but you train them ahead of time. You plot the average contamination percentage versus the bags sampled during these time periods, and then you pick the sampling frequency when the percentage drops below plus or minus 5%. And that's the end of my presentation. Next slide.
Great, that's Nick's contact information. Nick, thank you so much for that presentation. I noticed that there were as many as 110 people in this chat, and well, you're going to hear one hand clapping, or 2 hands clapping rather, for all 3 presentations. Just multiply that, not just by 110, but the resonance, the frequency by a whole lot more than that. Wonderful presentations, thank you. We have just a couple minutes. I'm going to end in 3 minutes so that everyone has a 2 minutes to do what they need to do before the next sessions. So one set of questions involves the motivation for doing the type of study that you did. There was a subset of questions about the role of reuse and reduction and whether that was designed into your methodologies or whether it easily could be with the type of work that you did. And I open it up to any.
So I'll take at least my part of the question. So that's okay. So the reduce, reuse part of the waste stream, can that easily be taken out? For our analysis, it was over 100 audits. Individual audits, we always have like one thing that's like, there is an abundance of shoes or something that's definitely, you know, donatable or reusable or something, but that is not quantified, you know, in the data. It's just a, hey, we saw this, you know, this is probably something you should be aware of. So it's not in the data itself, but that's a, you know, a good suggestion for moving forward is having something like that. But it's going to be like shoes for one building and something else for another building. It varies a lot. And our data did not include construction waste, by the way, C&D. Oh, but why do this? So a lot of our clients are doing waste audits for ESG goals, but a lot also use it for financial reasons. They need to understand their waste stream, and you know, getting a good look at their what's in their waste stream is important.
I guess fundamentally the question is weight basis the best measure for your clients still at this point? That has been consistently the case over time, but we see, at least in one case, a focus on contamination. Others look at the materials value lost. Others look at reduction opportunities. I'm just wondering whether if we hear from another speaker, some comments about what else people might be looking at, what else these businesses are looking at. There were some, I see it's 1:42. We're going to have to leave it there. There are, and I would encourage the speakers, if you get a chance to look through these questions, you can see who they're from. If you want to take the time on your own to follow up with anyone, please do so. And also for those of you who want to be in contact with any of the panelists, please do so. You have everyone's contact information. I'm going to turn it over to Chris, I believe, for a moment, who's going to give you some information about how to reach the next, how to get back to the plenary. Thank you so much again for your participation.
Thank you, everyone, for being here today, for sharing your knowledge and expertise, experience with us. Steve, thank you for moderating. There's never enough time, that we know. I want to remind everyone that on the website, the speaker bios are there. Their LinkedIn contact information is there. Should be a website if it was provided, so you have ways to get back in touch. You can also do a quick copy and paste of this chat if there are things you want. And that also includes that I put in the link to the main stage. It's the same link it's been all day long, but it's in there, and our plenary is starting in 1 minute. So we will see you over there, okay? Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.